Hello everyone and welcome to a new video of Mr. Mark Explains History. Today we continue with the time periods. In the last video we talked about prehistory and today about ancient history. So a little overview here of the 5 major time periods in Western history that we are talking about. So ancient history is the second. We're going to talk about characteristics, so what is special or what is like typical ancient history, why did it start and why did it end, and then in the next video Middle Ages and so on and so forth. So this is a little bit of repetition from the last time. Of course, when prehistory ends, ancient history starts. So that is the same thing. So what is that turning point? Why do historians say this is really a new time period? So I'll say it again. So around 3000 BC, the first civilizations started, but one important element is about writing. So in these first civilizations, in the last video I explained how they came about. They started to use writing. They started to write down things like for trade, for taxes. They started to write laws down. And people also started to record their own lives, some events, some stories. And that's really when we can start to study history, start to write history, because history is based on written sources. So when people start to write stuff down, we can study that and we can write a history based on that. So when writing is invented around 3000 BC with the first civilizations, that's when ancient history starts. Usually in, let's say in the West, in our history books, they talk about 3 major, let's say, civilizations that have really shaped Western society, and those 3 are always highlighted. So I'll stick to that because I want to really give you an explanation that connects with your history books also. Of course, there were many other civilizations at this time in other places like China, India. But as I said before, I'm really focused on this kind of these Western time periods, so more on Western history. So ancient Egypt, I guess a lot of history books start with ancient Egypt as one of the first major important civilizations. Then ancient Greece and ancient Rome. By the way, these blocks are not like perfect with the years when they really start, but it's more when they become relevant, when they start being discussed in the history books, let's say. So yeah, first Egypt, then Greece, and then Rome. So from now on, I'm gonna divide up each time period into 3 different slides related to characteristics. One is about politics, economic, social, and the final one is cultural. So political is all about government, who has power, who decides things, what are countries doing, let's say. So it's really about the government. And ancient history is the first period, or like say, is the period when we see a lot of things for the first time. So it means the first large states, the first big empires, such as ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire. You also have the Empire of Alexander the Great, the Persian Empire. There's many others, and it's really a time when you have these massive states. In the last video, I talked about how humans started with small groups, how they start to live in small farming communities, then cities, and now we're at the point where you have massive empires. And in these states, there's also new forms of government. So for the first time, we see these different forms of government. I guess monarchy is the one you might know, you've heard about. So it means a government with a king. Most countries at this time have one strong guy who starts calling himself a king. Some states have no king, and then we call them republics. So when it's governed by a group of people, Rome starts out as a monarchy, then becomes a republic, and then an empire. So they experience different forms of government. And of course, famously at this time in Athens, there's a little experience with democracy. It's not very democratic. It's not that everyone can, let's say, vote. Women cannot vote. If you're not a citizen, you cannot vote. Of course, enslaved people cannot vote. So it's really for male citizens of a certain age who are free and rich enough, let's say. They get to vote. But it's the first time ever we have this in human society. And the last thing is that there's also powerful leaders, such as the pharaoh in ancient Egypt, the Roman Empire, Roman emperor, such as Augustus you see here on the right. So for the first time ever, we also have these very powerful rulers. Here you can see a map of the Roman Empire at its height. So when it was the largest extent in 117 AD under Emperor Trajan. And you can see how massive this state was. So it spanned from all the way from Britannia to Syria and to Egypt. So it's a massive, massive state and empire. Very impressive. And we'll see later that in the Middle Ages, we don't really see this in Europe. Okay, next characteristics are about, let's say, economic and social history. So more focused on people, jobs, and money. Because we see these first large states, large empires, there's also very, let's say, large societies. So a lot of people live together. And then we start to use kind of these social structures. So maybe you've seen that before, these pyramids with like the king on top and then these different social groups all the way down. So there's large, let's say, big difference now for the first time between the super rich and a large group of more poor people. And this we'll see throughout all of the time periods that this is the case. You could argue that it's still the case, although it's a little bit more nuanced nowadays. You also have the first big city. So Rome famously had 1 million people living there at one point. But most people are farmers and they live in the countryside. And this is also the case for most time periods. And trade and contact between different civilizations takes place. So there's what we call like the ancient Silk Road. This means that silk from China made its way to Rome, for example, and the high class ladies in Rome loved Chinese silk. So and there's also coins found, more Roman coins all the way in the Middle East, and so there's really a lot of well, at least trade and contact. I wouldn't say a lot of with China, for example, but there's a lot of trade and contact between these different civilizations happening. And this is also a process we'll follow, which is that the world becomes more and more connected. So we're moving towards a global economy. Here you see a lovely picture of all the trade roads that were in some way connected. It was not like one big massive road with like signs saying this way to China, this way to Rome, but there were different, let's say, there were established routes from point to point how you could get to China. And as said, silk from China made its way to Rome. Final thing is about final characteristics about cultural things, so religion, art, lifestyle, cultural history. In ancient history, we already get a very high level of science, advanced science. Ancient Greece is most famous for that, so super high level of philosophy. Aristotle also did some biology, of course, maths with Pythagoras, Archimedes. So science is really already very advanced at this time in ancient history, so more than 2,000 years ago. Also art and architecture, so famously the Colosseum, the big theater amphitheater in Rome. So to be able to build that, you also need science, you also need maths to calculate how to build that and to be able to build that. So that shows a very advanced society. Also architecture and of course art of all the vases and the statues. There's really too much to talk about. It's just like I could talk about this for years and years, but we're focusing just on the basics overview right now. Also about religion. So most religions start off polytheistic, which means there's many gods. So Rome and Greece, there's loads. Probably they're the most famous gods, like Neptune, Poseidon in Greece, Mars. All the planets, right? They are named after Roman gods. But we also get the first monotheistic religions, which means they have one god. So Judaism and Christianity are, let's say, arriving at this time, are spreading at this time, are established. And all these ideas about science and religion, they are also spreading through trade along the Silk Road between civilizations. There's also an exchange of ideas, and there's also towards a more global community, the first steps. Now, why and when did it end? So most historians say around 500 AD we end ancient history. Why is that the case? Because of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. There's multiple reasons why it collapsed. Usually they say the direct cause is all these groups invading the Western Roman Empire, and there's a lot of chaos and plundering and fights going on. So in the Western Roman Empire collapses and is gone. This means there's no large stable state anymore. There's a bit of chaos. This means a lot of knowledge and science and writing is also lost there. And we enter a phase that is a bit disputed, but it's called the Dark Ages for two reasons. Why we almost have no written sources, so we don't really know what's happening. And of course, it's a less advanced society. So the Romans were super advanced with their bathhouses and architecture and heating systems and villas. And a lot of that is all gone. And also all the writing, the philosophy, etc. It's all gone. So that's why it's called the Dark Ages. In the next video about Middle Ages, we'll talk about that a bit more. So in the next video, Middle Ages, characteristics, same thing. Why did it start and why did it end? Thank you for watching. If you made it all the way here, have fun and learn history.